Okay, so for this lecture, I'm actually recording from my home, and I'm using an actual microphone, and I didn't have my PowerPoints with me, so I'm just going to go through the chapter, but it'll work pretty much the same. Overview of socialization. Basically, the idea is when people are born, they have the biological potential to become human. All right, now that's not to say that they don't have a human form and all that other kind of stuff. What it means is, from a sociological standpoint, is that humans, as biological organisms, need to be trained in a sense. They need to, what we call, internalize the culture. We need to internalize language and other behaviors that are associated with whomever it is that we are growing up with. So you probably heard that saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, that's sociological in nature. It doesn't necessarily take a village, but it takes other people. The interesting thing about humans is that we are born helpless. We are born dependent on other people. And so what happens is this process of socialization is essentially our attempt to address the issue of social psychology. Meaning what? Meaning there's some way that the brain develops and that our ability to have language and thoughts and feelings and those kinds of things, that's historically has been in the purview of psychology. But we claim it as being part of becoming a human, as becoming socialized. So socialization means the infant, the biological organism, becomes accustomed to, is enculturated, learns how to be and what to do in relationship with the people around him or her. So we essentially internalize, in a sense, the group expectations, the group standards, the group social norms, all those kinds of things which contribute to and develop us as individuals. So that's kind of the overall approach of what this idea of socialization means. And it's not something that just starts at birth and then ends when you're, 10 or 12 or something like that. It's a process that goes on for the remainder of our lives. And essentially what it points out to is that we are always subject to being influenced by other people. So I like to say that we're always under peer pressure, regardless of if we're by ourselves. Right now, I'm by myself in my house, but I'm still under peer pressure, meaning what? Meaning I'm not going to do anything really wild and crazy, right? Because I understand that there are certain expectations of me and there's certain social norms which I adhere to. And so even though there aren't literally people around me physically present, they're still influencing my behavior, which is true for us in virtually every situation we find ourselves in. So the question we have is, how do you go from a biological organism to the fully functioning, adults, even less, teenagers, kids that we see running around? So here's the way that I like to think about it to demonstrate the impact that other people have on us and our development of our sense of self, our sense of self-confidence, self-worth, all those things. Anytime you see the word self in front of another word, understand that that self part that they're referring to, it's attempting to describe the individual, but its origin is social. How so? I want you to do what we call a thought experiment. So think about an infant that is placed, let's say, on an island somewhere, all right, and they have no human contact. Now, they have everything that they need physiologically to survive, okay, but they have no other human talking with them, holding them, anything like that. Now, we actually have evidence of this. Your text talks about it. The impact that this lack of attention, this lack of other people being present, the impact that it has on an individual. But I want to take it a step further. And let's just suggest that this little baby, temporarily set aside your feelings, right? We're doing a thought experiment. We're not harming any babies. If this individual were able to survive, okay, in that situation, then how would he or she be different than us? This is a question that we have. And our contention would be they would be radically different. Why? Because they would not have been subjected to, or not have had the ability to be around other people, so they would not embrace, learn, what we say internalize all the things that are required for us to be able to interact with one another. In other words, there's a long process, ongoing process, which doesn't stop until the day we die, which involves us figuring out how to coordinate our behavior with the people around us. And that includes the development of having a self. So, see, this idea of self-development actually begins at birth. So the first thing that happens after a baby's born, generally within, less than an hour, is they acquire a name, right? So as soon as you have a name, now you have the opportunity for a self to develop. Why? Because what is lacking in that thought experiment is other people, as I mentioned. Now, one of the things that we don't recognize, unless you take a sociology class, is that it's actually other people that give us a sense of self. How so? So I have 3 older brothers, so there's 4 boys, right? We all have different names. So one of the things that I realized sooner or later, it took me a little while, I'm kind of slow sometimes, was that when my mother would utter the word John, right? It's just a vocalization, it's a sound. I recognized that that was in reference to me. So let me take myself out of it. That was in reference to this body, right? This body that we're calling John. Because of that, because I was recognized as an object separate from the other objects, not separate from my other brothers and my mom and dad, I developed a sense of self. I developed a sense of identity. I developed a sense of, oh, I'm not them. I occupy a different space. And then what happens? Once you develop a sense of self, once you develop that recognition of seeing your body as an independent object, then the people around you, who we call the agents of socialization, start telling you about yourself. They start telling you about what you're like, right? So they might tell you, oh, you're a smart boy, you're a good boy, oh, you're a happy boy, you're a funny boy, right? All those kinds of things. And that's where you begin to get ideas. You be able to get what we call self-concepts. We're not born with them. We got to get them from somewhere. Where do we get them? From other people. Interestingly enough, there's actually cultural standards that exist that we are measured against. So when somebody says you're a good boy, what is that? That's actually the implication is you're not a bad boy, see? So in order to be able to good boy, that means I must have been meeting some requirement, some standard that exists. But this is not something that we normally pay attention to, right? Clearly everybody knows what a good boy is. Well, not necessarily. So I'm trying to scroll through here. Let's see. I'm going to skip the psych perspectives on social development. You can read about those. I think we as a discipline have really failed to develop sociological theories of self-development to any great extent. We're actually relying on this one about George Herbert Mead. He was actually a social philosopher, and primarily he's one of the main contributors to this understanding that we have of self. I agree with what he's talking about. I think he attempts to try to systematize this idea of self-development. I think it makes sense, but its focus is on how we develop our sense of self through interaction with other people. This is the most important thing in my thinking. So let me click over to why socialization matters. This is 5.2 in the text. And if you scroll down, you can see nature versus nurture, right? So that's what I was talking about. We used to say nature versus nurture. Now we say nature and nurture because we recognize that the biology that we come with, the genes and all of the things that the genes create, right, the DNA and the DNA profiles and all that kind of stuff, that they're actually influenced by the environment. They're influenced by other people. So we now know that genes can kind of turn on and off. And there's a whole new area of study called epigenetics, which is quite fascinating. I don't have time to go into it, but if you get a chance, look it up. Epigenetics, very cool stuff. So here's this Chris Langdon that I wanted you to read and comment on. And so what I'm asking you to do with the assignment is to look through, use the material from the text, and respond to the questions that I ask using the material from the text, okay? So all right, so why is it important? Because basically we would not be able to function as people living with other people if we did not know how to live, in a sense. How are we supposed to be? Who are we supposed to marry? What are we supposed to say in certain situations? We learn all those things, okay? So then we have the, agents of socialization. And these are really important. So remember in my very first lecture, I talked about how it's the environment and the things in the environment that interact with us. Well, guess what? All of these agents of socialization are things in the environment that interact with us. Your family, right? Family is very important. We know, however, that in America at least, and probably in Western Europe, Once a child reaches the age of 12, 13 or so, the influence on the family begins to wane, and the influence on from peer groups begins to increase. One of the reasons why, probably when you were younger, your parents hopefully said, where are you going? Who are you going to be with? What time are you going to be home? Who's going to be there? Are there going to be any parents around, right? This is our job as parents, to ask those kind of questions to check out your peer group. So we also are socialized through school. So not just learning stuff in school, but learning how to be in school, right? So school teaches us things like about authority and responding to authority and getting along with other people and how to resolve conflict, all that kind of stuff. So it's not just learning stuff, learning content. Workplace, you and I both know that your behavior is shaped by where you work, right? There's certain things you can't say, there's certain things you can't do, there's certain things you're expected to do. Not surprising. So we're looking at how our being in different environments, right? Different social situations, how they have an impact on our behavior. And they do. They change us. So that's why I said the socialization process is not something that just happens once. It continues throughout our entire lifetime because we move into different situations. We occupy different, we'll see this later, things called statuses. You get married, your behavior changes. You have children, your behavior changes. You get a job, your behavior changes. You attend services of any kind, religious services, your behavior changes. So all of these different things, these agents of socialization, influence us. Mass media in particular. We'll address that more when we talk about the topic of media later on in the semester, in this very brief semester that we have. Lastly, socialization across the lifespan. This is, don't necessarily take everything they say about how, that you become a young adult and you get married and all that kind of stuff. There's really quite a bit of, there's more fluidity to it that then is implied. One of the reasons I don't really like talking about socialization across the lifespan in terms of different types of stages or something, because it really doesn't make any sense. Resocialization, this is something that happens when people enter different, what we call total institutions. So psychiatric hospital, penitentiary, drug abuse treatment program, seminary, if you go into the military. So notice that I'm not passing a judgment on whether, you're a good or bad person. We're simply acknowledging that certain types of environments that we call total institutions are designed to radically shape who we are, the way we think, our self-concept, our identity, and more specifically, our behaviors. So quite fascinating stuff. And I think that's it. I'm trying out a new screen recording program called Screencast-O-Matic. And so I only have 15 minutes, and I'm up to 13 now, which you're probably happy about since I won't go longer than 15. But anyhow, understand that socialization, that from our standpoint, if the things that we develop, the things that make us human in a sense, are a result solely of our interaction with other people. This goes back to that thought experiment. So if we go back and we think about somebody who was raised without any social influence whatsoever, any interaction with other people whatsoever, they would be really, really different than us. They wouldn't have a language. They wouldn't have a sense of self. They wouldn't know how to respond to appropriate situations. Their way of learning would be radically different. Fortunately, our biology equips us to be able to learn, okay? But that doesn't mean if you're left all like this thought experiment all alone, you're going to develop a sense of values and morals and you're going to learn language. No, you need other people for that kind of stuff. It goes back to the cultural standards that I was talking about. Cultural standards are part of a group of people. And whoever we're with, we're under the influence of those standards, whether we recognize it or not. That's why our behavior changes, depending upon where we are and who we're with. Hopefully this makes sense. Again, if not, let me know.